We're live. How are you guys all doing?
Hey, hi everybody. Thanks for joining.
Hello, hello.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
we got a pretty good crew.
Yeah.
As a quick housekeeping item, hopefully everybody can see on the menu there the chat button. If you are in the chat right now and can get in there, tell us where you are and maybe something fun that you're doing this summer. I know we just talked a little bit about this, Paul. You're going to Yellowstone.
Yeah, man. That'll be fun. I don't
Yeah,
actually know what to do in Yellowstone, so if any of y'all have good advice, please put that in the chat or just message me directly later.
That's a great tip. Put some Yellowstone activities in there. I'm going to San Francisco this summer, so we're doing Giants games, Monterey Bay, a couple of other things. Visit some of the places my wife grew up at.
You going to SeaWorld?
No. We probably will just hit the aquarium and the beach is my guess.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah. Mikey, Aaron, what about you guys?
I got a trip to the Minnesota State Fair in my future, so
Wow.
going to the state fair, and my family has a cabin out there in Minnesota, so we're gonna take my little one to the lake.
That'll be good. Yeah, no, I tend to stay put in the summer. It's the fall, spring when I do most of my traveling. So I'm looking forward to stay here in Utah and bake a little bit.
I love it. Well, thank you guys for being a part of this. I'm very excited to introduce this group of people and be able to kick off this webinar. In the past, I've pretty much hosted the majority of the webinars. Zach has certainly done a couple of them as well here at Mobley, with the idea of trying to proliferate the event marketing role and the capabilities and interests and opportunities for event and field marketers. But now we've been blessed to have hired Erin Griss, who's now a marketing manager here at Mobley and who leads events for us. And so she'll actually be taking over for me on these webinar series. I'm hopeful that she'll invite me to join some of these in the future again. So I want to turn it over to her and let her introduce the webinar and the details here. But I'm really excited again that all of you are joining us. This webinar will also be live on demand after the event today as well. So please share this with your team, share this with your colleagues, any managers, CFOs, hopefully, as you're having those conversations with them. And then the last thing before I give it back to you, Aaron, is again, use the chat, use the Q&A. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to jump in and ask them. We want this to be conversations and of great value to all of you. And so if we're not asking the right questions or we're not getting at the thing that's eating at you, please make sure you ask those and we'll do our best to respond to those. So Aaron, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. Nice to see everyone here. And then thank you all for joining as well. Short introduction on me. I've been at Mobley for about a month and a half now. So jumping right in, we had 3 events last month, or I guess May starts tomorrow. So 3 events in April. So we really, I learned by the fire hose this month, and it was great. But definitely spent my past life at a lot of events. So fun to see this side of the business at Mobley too. So I am lucky enough to be joined by this wonderful crew though. So I first want to introduce Paul, which I'm sure everyone who's joining knows, that the infamous Paul, but Paul we're so lucky to have you, the marketing guru of Utah and the world really, and taco lover. So Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything there, but want to make sure that everyone knows who you are. And
I mean, how do you top marketing guru of the world? That's probably the kindest compliment I can get there. So thank you so much, Aaron. I mean, I'm currently VP of marketing at B10 Capital. We're a boutique financial firm. I've been in the marketing space for about 20 years. Big love for events and, occasionally work well with finance people. So I think that's probably all anyone needs to know.
Perfect. Awesome. And then we also have Mikey joining us, which I forced Mikey to come on here because he is the one that I have to convince to give me more budget for our events. So I thought it would be helpful to see that dynamic in action live. So Mikey is our head of finance here at Mobley. But Mikey, if you want to introduce yourself as well, that'll be helpful.
Yeah, of course. So everyone, hi, I'm Mikey, finance guy at Mobley. My whole career has been in finance. Started out here, I stayed in Utah, but started out locally here at Entrada before moving on to Chatbooks, and then had a brief stint at my own startup before talking with Chris and being able to talk all finance and Mobley, and then realized that it was a perfect fit for me. Meaning personally, for me to join, and luckily Chris agreed that it would be okay.
Perfect fit for us too, Mikey.
So excited to be here and excited to discuss this because I am very passionate about reporting, ROI, budgeting, and so forth. So I'm excited to have Paul here, and we were able to discuss that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. So obviously the point of this is to really, get to the grit of aligning marketing and finance to maximize that event ROI. But I think we really need to start out by saying, Paul, this would be helpful for you to answer, I think, is do you feel like there is a strong way to prove event ROI? Is this something that we should be tracking, or is this, should we be saying, ROI is not something we should need from events? I want to hear perspective from the larger lens of how you feel about event ROI.
Yeah, for sure. And is it okay if before I answer that, I want to just take a step back real quick?
Yes, please.
And I think where I've been blessed is that I've been on both sides of that coin, right? I know what it's like to be just a startup event marketer where that's my whole world, right? And I'm fighting for every dollar. But I also know what it's like to be a CMO or a VP of marketing, right? Where I have to go sit in with these executives and we're looking at, okay, this just cost us $50,000, and what actually came out of it, and what are we doing this thing for? And I think for a long time, and I think it's natural, right? It felt like we were butting heads, right? I think that's a pretty universal feel here. It finally clicked out, for me a while ago, that it's, I'm sure everyone here has been to a wedding, right? If you've been married, great. I don't know, if one person's focused on the playlist, right? And one person's focused on, the seating arrangement, neither of those are bad. And it took me a little while to really understand that we both want the same thing, right? And once I could understand that, okay, maybe the language that we speak is a little different, but the goal is the same, it didn't really become a me versus them kind of thing, right? It turned into okay, I think there's a world in which we can go together in the same area. And then just to, go back to your original question, absolutely. Now, I agree that not everything we can tie a direct ROI to. I think there are things that we can do depending on your attribution models, and we could probably have an entire different webinar about the various attribution models. But understanding how events can become a trust accelerator, that absolutely matters. Understanding how events can, again, influence pipeline, and if there's ways that we can start tracking that, absolutely. But every good marketing effort should have an ROI attached to it.
Yeah, agreed. So if we look at that, why do we feel like ROI is so hard to track? I know, Jesse, you just put in the chat, brand awareness is difficult to track. There's not really a number that you can put to brand awareness other than impressions. So what is the common pitfall of tracking event ROI, would you say?
Oh, sorry, was that for me?
It's for anyone, but Paul, yes, I would love for you to answer it. But Mikey, I think you can add some insight in here too.
Yeah, I'll start from a finance perspective, and I think the hardest thing for ROI, whatever it might be, whether it's brand, event marketing, demand generation, it's really just getting the attribution and the data down so you can easily be able to track the information, right? I'm a data guy. I want to see the metrics. I want to see percentages. I want to see conversion rates. And I think what tends to happen is an event, from my lens, becomes like a black box where I know I'm pumping in a lot of money and I'm sending a lot of people to an event. But when all of a sudden, when I'm looking through reports, or I'm in those meetings that Paul mentioned and hearing how the event went, it's very difficult for me sometimes to see how those are turning into revenue dollar signs. And so one thing I've learned is that the best thing to do is to be able to sit down and just level set, KPIs, level set what the goal outcome is, maybe even come out with what an anticipated ROI is, and how, kind of like a story problem. Here's the finish line. What are we going to build, or what's the story we're going to build to eventually get to that ending? then we can, we can put it all in motion and then get the information and a calculation and an output that we want. I think a lot of times that breakdown of communication happens a lot, and that's where you tend to sense that marketing and finance butt heads. Paul, curious to get your take and if you agree with some of your experience.
No, I love it. So just disclaimer, Mike is paying me money to just agree with everything he says. So across the board, we're just going to be agreeing on everything. Sorry, two thoughts. I think if you're tracking just marketing source revenue, that's difficult because the cost of it is upfront and immediate. But again, that's a lag indicator, right? Like if you have a complex sales cycle, like we're looking at weeks, months before we can really start to see what an event generated. And a lot of industries have event seasons where you got to go to a lot of events very quickly. You're prepaying for events way into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the time gap between when you pay for an event and actually being able to show a direct marketing source like lead and what that turned into, there's a pretty big gap there, right? And again, I think it's really easy to get lost inside of that time gap and not see value. Again, one thing that like I really want to make sure that my teams do is look into how are we influencing pipeline along with, again, just directly sourcing pipeline, right? Who are the conversations that we had at that event, right? Who are open opportunities that we met with there? What does that look like? And then was there a way that we can start to see all the ways that marketing has influenced pipeline as well, right? Again, I can't put that into an exact dollar amount, but we can see how many open opportunities we had those conversations with. Right? I can't say that increased the conversion rate by 32% exactly, but we can see how many pipeline dollars an event touched. And then when you zoom out even further, you start to understand like, okay, we do see that event influenced pipeline does close at a faster rate or a higher rate, because again, part of what we're doing is that these events act as a trust accelerator, right? It's way easier for me to build a solid relationship with a 5-10 minute conversation with you at an event versus, spamming your inbox a bunch of times as an SDR.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I think there's real value there. And then the second point, and I absolutely love that you brought it up, Mikey, and that's like, this is a big part of my playbook as well, is, I try to teach my teams, it's not, hey, we come up with a plan and then we go present it to finance alone, but let's start looping in finance and sales way earlier in our discussions, right? If we can let finance feel like they're helping us co-create the plan and be a part of this. And again, I think it's important that everyone understands their roles. Like marketing should be confident in what they're doing, right? They should be able to help lead those discussions that are relevant to them. But there's a difference between being confident and being defensive. Again, when I was a lot younger in my career and sometimes these questions would come up, I'd get super defensive, right? And I'd kind of snap and be like, dude, you gotta just get off my back. But getting them involved early, helping us get aligned on, all these little things. What you brought up, I think, is a fantastic idea, right? Not only let's get an assumption of what we think a solid ROI should be out of this, but how are we tracking ROI? Again, directly sourced versus influence is a big difference, right? Do we want to see a number of appointments coming out of it, right? What is the estimated timeline that we think this will take? Ensuring that marketing and finance are on the same page there, and making sure that finance feels like they've had real input in creating that plan together, I have found has like really opened up revenue pathways that can get us into more events quickly.
Yeah. Paul, you kind of stole some words out of my mouth there. I was going to say like the times I felt most attacked after an event as an event marketer was times that I wasn't confident in what the results were from that event. So like me coming back from an event and immediately finance being like, what happened was because my lack of reporting, really, my lack of knowledge of what just happened at that event, or what is sales doing with the leads that I met, or that is kind of where my hostility comes in when finance asks me what happened. And so like the collaboration of all of the teams is so, so important. I want to get really granular here, Paul. I know you mentioned like the attribution of new leads versus, now I'm blanking, the touch points with leads that are already in your pipeline. How are you tracking that? Is that like a lead score thing for you? Is it, like what are you using in your CRM to say this was touched at this point in the pipeline process and this accelerated our conversion.
Yeah, and yeah, let's get granular for a second. I think there's a couple different things here to discuss. First, I've tried so many of the different attribution models, right? I mean, first touch, last touch, U, W, I mean, all of them. Like, couldn't figure out. And honestly, again, just pure attribution in dollar sense, like that can be pretty difficult to do.
Yeah.
And I know earlier I mentioned, one, we partner with finance, but the second part of it is that we partner with sales, right? It's not, hey, look, this is the event strategy, and I'm just going to present like this is the playbook, and you got to go follow this thing. But ensuring sales also gets buy-in on the event is critical, especially in the world pre-Mobley, largely because at the end of the day, sales reps are the ones who actually tag leads and when they're manually entering, right? So if they don't give a crap about me or the event or understand, why this matters, they'll always just choose whatever the first drop-down option is because that's the easiest one, right? And again, there's no hate there. That was a big thing that I had to learn too, is like, okay, once sales understands why this is important and they feel like they're part of this strategy and they understand that we're on the same team. And again, then it's not finance versus marketing versus sales. It's we're all on the same page together. So if sales is there and they're on board and they're willing to help understand, and they really do understand why it's so important that we get the lead data in quickly and we're tagging it correctly, right? Then we get to actually see a clearer picture, because if you have bad data come in, you have bad data go out, and that's just what it is. Obviously, again, quick plug for Mobley here, and disclaimer, contrary to my earlier statement, Mobley's not actually paying me to say these things. Mobley has helped a ton because we can put these leads in fast, right? We can scan them right away. We know they're getting tagged to the right campaign. We use Salesforce as our CRM. The great part about Salesforce, and I'm not saying Salesforce is the end-all be-all solution, but for us, the great thing with Salesforce is that one lead or one contact can sit in multiple campaigns, right? So we can look at any we can look at any lead, any opportunity that's already open and is associated with an event campaign, along with all new leads that came from an event campaign, right? So a new lead would be directly marketing sourced from this event. But if we have, I don't know, if Chris is an open opportunity that we haven't closed, and then we have a great conversation. We're having a great conversation at the event, and we can still tag them in, right? We scan the badge, it adds into Salesforce, it sees that it's already an open opportunity, it tags to the same campaign. We can still run a report that says, hey, give me all opportunities, open opportunities that are still associated with this campaign, and we can get an idea of how much pipeline we've influenced.
Yeah.
Right? And then when we take one step back, we can start to see, hey, do event opportunity, opportunities that have been touched by an event convert at a faster rate or at a higher rate, right? And then we can get at least fairly good ideas, maybe not down to the penny, but we do start to see trend data.
Yeah.
And Jesse, I see your comment there, and I'm 100% with you, man. Pardot, account engagement. I have some words, and we can have a whole nother webinar, me and you, Jesse, if you want.
Yeah. No, we appreciate the shout out, but also, I hear you on I think my next question is for you, Mikey, is the fact that Paul just touched on, we don't have that exact conversion data of, okay, we touched this and it may have converted faster because we met them at an event, but we don't have the exact number. We don't have the exact percentage that accelerates by. How does marketing convey that to finance in a way that doesn't just get swept under the rug and said, well, we don't have a hard number, so I can't give you more budget unless we have that hard number?
Well, as Paul was sharing this, I started thinking to myself, it's like, I do think, I'm thinking here as I talk here, I do think that there's a lot of, not fluff, but there's obviously still a lot of assumptions and a lot of, with time, things will get confirmed, right? And I don't think, I'm a nice finance guy, right? I'm not going to come to the fire and be like, I need an absolute number. However, I do, just listening to Paul speak, it gives me a lot more assurance as head of finance to know that our dollars are being well thought through and, most importantly, very carefully invested. And if it's like, hey, listen, we have assumptions and we're going to confirm these assumptions, but you're going to have to give it some time, or, we have to look at last year's events and somewhat we're kind of draw assumptions that we're going to apply into this year. As long as there's a lot of thought and conversation going into it, it definitely relaxes the mood. The number one thing it's very difficult is when I'm approving dollars to go out, and then it's like we spend all this money and then it's like the outcome doesn't happen, right? Like for me, from finance, it's like if I'm going to go send marketing and sales to an event, how many deal I start doing some napkin math, right? Like, okay, how many opportunities does this need to generate our average deal size in order to cover the cost, not only of the event, but like obviously a lot of the other soft costs of like salary, travel, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so when I don't see that come in, and it's like immediately that's where I start getting a little more defensive. Being able to have a conversation with someone like Paul and just see the data and see the thought process and and it's like, hey, like you're not seeing the immediate result now, but look, like, historically it's been a 3-month lag, 4-month lag, or like this is a new event, so it's going to be, a little bit longer. I can feel more comfortable with approving more dollars because there's a lot more thought into it versus just like me feeling like we're just going to go spend money because we're told to go spend money, right? So I don't think I need to see hard, concrete numbers, but just to see the thought process and eventually see some confirmation of those assumptions is great. But being able to make sure we're having those open conversations and teach me, like a lot of times my ROI calculation is simply what was my dollars invested, what's the outcome of it. I'm very top level, but to see the thought that Paul's put into it, sharing that with the finance team is going to definitely soften barriers and most importantly, create a collaboration to be like, okay, yeah, great. Like we can continue to invest in this particular channel.
Yeah.
I think the one thing I would add just quickly is this is how we got to the sort of common practice of counting number of scans. You go to an event, how many scans did you get, right? Because at the very top of the funnel, if you did the math, 1,000 scans equals this many leads, which equals this many opportunities, which then we know what our conversion rate is at the opportunity level. And so finance is saying, why didn't the team get 100 scans or 1,000 scans or whatever the number was, right, that they were targeting? But Paul did a really good job of articulating, like, there's so much more nuance to the conversations and to the level or the location in the funnel maybe that these people are in today. They may be already target accounts. They may already have opportunities set forth. They may be existing customers that you're having conversations with that you're talking about upsell. You may have maybe a net new lead or company or account that you've never talked to, right? Like there's so much nuance that's very difficult to track. And so I think sticking with this idea of number of scans by itself or looking at opportunities by itself, because that does take a while, or attribution alone or influence alone is why ROI, and some might say impossible to get from a single event for a finance person that's looking at numbers like this. So I only bring that up because I think it's important to understand why field and event marketers have a hard time articulating that, because it isn't just a number of scans or a number of opportunities tomorrow, because they don't come to fruition that quickly or that clearly.
Yeah. And quantifying building trust or quantifying conversations is not a thing. And I think it's the education piece as well of like, okay, events are now really changing after the pandemic. And as we come into these new times and like, is it new time? The market's crazy. Like we need to look at events and be educating our teams on events. Like event and field marketers need to be educating our teams ahead of time instead of that after an event, you come back, it's your first day back in the office, you're trying to follow up with all these leads, you're trying to make sure that your pipeline's built. Instead, it should be like a beforehand, let's educate the team on why we're going to these events. What events are we doing? Events can be qualified as so many different things. Is it, it's this trade show, or I'm going to dinner with these clients? There's just so much nuance to it all. So I appreciate all of that. But I want to take a step back and just ask everyone on this call, do you all have any real world examples of overspending and missed insights from a particular event that you can share? I guess Paul and Chris, this might be better suited for you. Yeah. Mike, you probably have an example of a team that you're like, I don't know why we did that one. But
no, I'm happy to, right? I have many examples of events done incorrectly, and then occasionally I have a couple examples where we figured out how to do it right. So, again, for me initially, I was very focused on, like again, this is a time to be creative. We can be fun. We can be different. We can stand out. How many bad scans do we need to get? Like, that was the world in which I lived for a little while. And because I didn't loop in, sales, because I didn't loop in finance, there's a lot of opposition, right? And, at times I think it was a little bit of just like beat them over the head until they say yes, right? Like, I would bring it up in, all the executive calls about why I need all this budget. And if we don't, we're going to miss these big, goals and, whatever. Anyways, so I ran a series of events a while ago sponsored a series of events. And we probably spent, I don't know, probably north of $250,000. And we generated a couple thousand leads or bad scans. And I was super excited about it. And I thought, yeah, no, we did all the things that we needed to do. And, later I went and found out that we didn't convert a single one of those. Right. And so I think there were, like, again, the two big misses is that, one, because I didn't coordinate anything with finance, they just saw it as like a massive expense. Right. And it was very, very hard to be like, oh, no, we got good things out of it. Yeah, look at all these bad scans. And they're like, okay, but couldn't we have just bought a list for a lot cheaper? And it's like, well, yes, but the booth was cool and y'all need to be okay with that. Right. That's a pretty hard sell. And then again, because we didn't get buy-in from our sales lead, sales had very little motivation to actually do any follow-up. Right. I mean, like, yes, they would do some follow-up, but the reality of it is that I'd probably say 90% of those leads never were touched. Right. And again, I don't fault sales. Like, they had no idea where these leads really were coming from, or what the talk track was, or why all of a sudden they had 500 new leads that they had to go call. Because again, there were like thousands and thousands of these bad scans that just showed up, and they started calling them, and half of them were disqualified and they weren't really a good fit. And, on the flip side of it, because we didn't speak with them earlier on, we didn't really understand what a good lead was even. Right. So again, we were just chasing people down for badges, and then making sure that we're manually entering into the CRM, but we didn't really get value out of it. Right. And again, I think if we were to go back and do that separately, really leaning on the insights of the finance and sales teams together would have significantly changed our strategy and ensured that we had a clear definition of what winning looks like together, and then a path forward.
Yeah, I've experienced this several times. I've worked for some large blue chip companies that would go out and sponsor large events, spend over $1 million on their presence at the event. One in particular was in Vegas, and there was what you might call a sidecar event on top of their booth spend, where they had rented out this massive facility. I think they had the link where I think it's that big Ferris wheel right in Vegas, and then the zip line. They sort of zip lined people down to the link and then got up in there. And so tons and tons of money spent on this. And I think they ended up with 5 people that showed up total. And 3 of them were existing partners that showed up. And so I think in that case, $50,000, $60,000 had got, it's been spent on the food and the drinks and the setup and the renting of all of the things that they did. And so that was a huge one, big mistake. But, often it's sort of chalked up to like, hey, we're experimenting, or we're trying something new, or we're using MDF funds. So it doesn't really matter how much it costs. It wasn't actually my budget, in those cases. And I talk to probably 10 or so field and event marketers every week. And I ask this question a lot. And the most common issue is similar, Paul, to what you described. But I think a little somewhat different in that just knowing the buyer and who's going to be there. Often you can go really fast and find that a rep is like, this is the right event to go to. Cool, let's sponsor. How much? Oh, it's $20K. Great. You're going to go get a bunch of leads. How many deals does that take? They're like, oh, one deal pays for the whole thing. And then it's a dead event. They didn't, because we didn't do our research. We didn't know what it was. The rep wasn't able to get any deals out of it, right? For whatever reason. And that story happens over and over and over again, because there wasn't enough research that went into the right event with the right people at the right time, with the right messaging. So yeah, I see it all the time.
Yeah, I think that's like a common phenomenon within field and event marketers is like, oh, we feel pressure to go to this event because we went last year, or we're friends with the event planner, or someone recommended this 10 years ago and we should do it this year. And it's like, okay, is this fitting within our playbook for this season? And really cutting out the noise that you don't need is helpful as well. But Mikey, I want to touch base on the stat that you mentioned earlier that was so funny to Chris and I, because we had totally different reactions from the marketing brain to the finance brain. It was like the complete opposite. And I was like, this needs to be shared with the larger group because this was a perfect example of where confusion can sometimes lie. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the audience, before this call, I did a little bit of research, spent some time prepping, wanting to make sure I kind of understood what the world, aside from my personal experience, what is out there in the world. And what I learned is that 48% of marketers say that they can measure in-person event ROI effectively. And that was from a survey that came out in 2023, so fairly recent. It was pretty funny because as I was sharing this with Aaron and Chris, both of them were like, whoa, that's pretty high. And on the opposite side, my finance brain was like, that's less than 50%. That's not very high at all whatsoever. Like I expected that number to be a lot higher. And then some other interesting things to just share that I learned is that what was it? 60% of marketers lack a standardized ROI process. And that's as of a survey in 2022. And then that aligned teams are 2.5 times more likely to hit ROI targets. And that was a different survey that came out in 2023. So I want to bring those up because I do think it's like, wow, only 48% of marketers are confident that they can nail an ROI, an in-person event ROI. 60% lack essentially standardized ROI tracking or like lining up the team. And then you're 2.5 times more likely to hit your ROI or gain an effective ROI reporting if you're aligning all the teams together. And so kind of trying to bring all those and merge them into context for me, it's like, I definitely realize the 2.5 times, like the more likelihood of nailing the ROI. But I think it's crazy that 60% are lack of standardization of an ROI process. So just some info, some thoughts. I feel the 60%, the 48% a lot, obviously, because this has been a game changer for me of sitting down. I've sat down in many meetings where like, it's just give us the money. It's a lot of fluff. I know Jesse, I think it was Jesse brought up brand awareness, or someone talked about brand awareness. There's a lot of brand awareness, which is very difficult to track dollars to. And so then when I just spend the money and I don't see anything and it's getting chalked up to brand awareness, I'm like, well, this is where that 60% comes in, where it's like we're lacking a standardized ROI process to really understand if these dollars were well thought out and invested.
Yeah. And I think that's where the collaboration piece comes in for everyone. Like that education of brand awareness is really important, but how much of our total budget are we going to, allot to that, whereas how much of it is going to be allotted to, no, we're going to touch base with these leads that we have in our pipeline, and this might, really quicken the deal pipeline. So please put in any questions that you all have, but I just want, Paul, I want your biggest hot take on events. Like I want something that's really going to be like, okay, that was a hot take.
Oh man. Hot take. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, go bold, right? Grab a lot of attention. I don't know if that's a hot take. Honestly, I think events are hard just because it is this like, I don't know, I was super defensive about them, right? Again, this idea that like events are a marketing thing and everyone needs to back off. Like these are my fences and like you need to let me own my little kingdom. But the reality of it is like events are a multi-department thing. Right? It's a finance thing. It's a marketing thing. It's a sales thing. Like there's so many moving pieces. And I don't fully understand why like it's defaulted to like it's just a marketing thing. But again, I think that the core of it, like that's why there's so much friction amongst multiple teams when we start going to the event space.
Yeah.
Right. That and I don't know, try to get thrown out. If you can get, if a lawyer calls you within the first 24 hours, you're doing a good job. And we've had that happen before. So
that is awesome. Oh man. And then for the larger group, what would you say to a company thinking of eliminating events altogether because they can't see the ROI?
I start with this. I would say don't do it. I would say figure out how to talk to finance and help them understand what they're missing. Right now, events on average for companies with 100 or more employees, it's the largest budget right now item in the marketing category, the marketing budget, and the problem with it with finance, from what and Mikey, you can confirm this, and Paul, in your conversations, but is that it looks on the outside like we're putting it all into these big tentpole events and hard to figure out where the influence, what's the real return on it. But if you talk to the reps, the ones that are there and talking to the folks, they'll be able to tell you that it was because of that in-person conversation. It was because of that dinner. It was because of the meeting that we had. It was because I had that sort of, that happy connection, that just randomly happened in line at coffee, that I was able to get that deal and move that thing in the right direction. It's although hard to quantify, there's a reason why most companies are spending the largest portion of their marketing budget on events. It's because it is what's driving the most conversion. It is what's driving and building that trust. It is what's getting your brand out there beyond any other element that you can do with your people, your culture, in a way that nobody else can do it for you. And so my initial reaction is don't let this happen. Focus and figure out how to get it done. And you'll be significantly better off for it.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think Chris nailed it in the sense that I see dollars and I see dollars getting spent, and obviously it scares me, right? But if someone can come to me with a very calculated risk, not calculated risk, actually, yeah, calculated risk is the term I use, of how these dollars are going to be spent and what we can anticipate about it, it could definitely ease my tension and nerve of understanding to be like, wow, okay, Paul or Chris or whoever the event marketer is or marketing person is, they have a plan. And obviously with any plan that gets executed, it can go well or it can go wrong. But as long as I see there's a lot of thought and effort put into it, it will ease my tension and somewhat apprehensiveness to just be able to go spend those dollars, apprehension to spend those dollars. I do think I've been in those meetings where it's we overspent in the budget, but at the end of the day, it's we established our brand, we established ourselves in the world. And while it's hard for finance to see, I've been at companies where it's a game changer what attending one event did, or just how I really like how Chris used the culture aspect of it, being able to show what the company culture is, what it would be like to be in business with the company. And this was really big, by the way, at Entrada. It's just people would come to us and be we're drawn to you as a company, as a culture, based on what we're seeing at events. And that generated a lot of business. So obviously it helped ease the tension with finance, but ahead of time, if it's going to get axed, if you can present a plan, a thoughtful plan, and show it to finance, it definitely gets conversations going to the point where there can be some negotiation, some compromise of let's not cut all the budget, or let's do some testing and so forth.
Yeah. I love all those ideas. And really quick, I think everyone's kind of covered the main points. Just a couple things to think about, right? Events are incredibly powerful, right? And I think so because a physical presence, there's a real value to that, right? If it's an event full of whatever industry leaders and you are there, it shows the people in the room that you're supposed to be in that room. Right? And again, I do think there's a real value to it. I think, Chris, to your point, there is something to be said about the culture, the ability to answer a question in real time, show that we're real people. I think that instills confidence. And at the end of the day, people generally buy from people, right? It shows that we're not just some faceless website that exists somewhere that's probably run by AI, but there's actual humans here who, care and they want to have a real relationship with you. And again, I think all those points do matter. And I know we've kind of discussed it already, but the ability to zoom out and start to see trend data is fairly critical, right? If we invest into these shows and then, what do we see at high level trend data? Even if I can't get you down to the exact attribution model that we want to, right? If I can't get you down to the penny, I understand, but we do see that post event, we close at, 12% faster.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever that may be. But the other part to remember is events are just one arrow in the quiver. Right? I'm not saying that events are the, like, I don't know, that magic whatnot for every single company. I do think it takes time. I do think it takes like real thought, and then having a plan and a strategy, and then the team to execute that.
Yeah.
Right? Lots of money can get lost just chasing sponsorships.
Yep.
Yeah. And the only point I'll add is like events can mean so many things. So if your finance person is coming to you and saying we're getting rid of our complete events budget, like there has to be some strategy talk there of like, okay, if we're cutting back on our trade show budget, can we talk about intimate dinners? Can we talk about, another avenue for events that might fit in better, and that collaboration is important. So I want to get to Paige's question, and then we'll get to Lori's, and feel free to add any more. But what are the best things from your experience to do at an event for brand awareness?
You guys good if I go first on this one?
Please do. I was hoping you would. You've done a great job.
Likewise.
Oh, thanks, man. Okay. I think a big area where most marketers fail is that we fail to really deep dive into who are we talking to here, and who do we want to be to this person, right? And like what I mean by that, I think we have a couple examples, and none of these were massively expensive, right? I used to fall into the trap of like the more money we had, the more we could stand out, and it just turns out like I could just buy more stress balls, but that doesn't actually make me stand out anymore. We did a conference once, and for this company, we were heavily focused on partners, right? And what we found is we did a real deep dive into like who these partners were, is that they felt initially that we were actually a threat to their business, that we were trying to take clients from them, right? And so like in this realm, we wanted to present this, and like we figured out who our target demographic was. They were mostly male, they were a little bit older, probably not playing a ton of sports, and we figured out like, you know what, they resonate well with this like whole Batman idea. They're all, a lot of them read comic books growing up, and so like again, it was not a massively expensive play, but at that booth, just to help stand out, we hired some actor to come dressed up as like the 1960s or whatever Adam West Batman, and our giveaway was a comic book that like actually explained how we worked together. And so we hired an artist to like create this whole comic book for us. And it was fascinating to see how many people wanted to come see it, and just to like see what was going on, and then actually be able to convert them into real business as they actually understood where we were. Like the whole idea there was that we wanted to show that they were Batman in our world, that we were Alfred, right? Our only job was to support them as a partnership. And once they could understand that, again, like we just saw a massive increase in business come out of it. Anyways, I have so many examples that go down that realm. I'm happy to share more if it makes sense, but it is not a cost thing. I promise. It is a deep understanding of who you're talking to, and then finding a creative way to cut through the noise to get your message to that person.
Yeah, I totally agree, Paul. That was going to be my take. It doesn't need to be a cost thing. You can go in with very low cost and get your brand out there. A few of the ways that I've seen others do this is just very bright colors and a lot of people, and just being kind of flashy at the event, especially if it's an event that's typically dull with lots of blues and browns and blacks. And, like you can bring in the bright colors to those kinds of events, and it'll stand out significantly. So anyway, I think there's a lot of things you can do outside of the event. One of the events that we went to last year, we actually rented helicopters and took people on tours on these helicopters. And what was great about that was that we became known as like the helicopter booth. Everybody quickly knew who Mobley was because we were doing the helicopters. And so, and that wasn't that expensive, because we only took like 12 people, and it ended up being like a couple $1,000s maybe. And we had another partner that paid for most of it. So there's a lot of ways and creative ways to go in and get that brand awareness out there beyond just spending a ton of money.
Yeah. And in today's day and age, it's fun to be a little bit provocative. You don't have to, there's a line there still, I believe, but like it doesn't have to be so serious anymore, especially in B2B. Like we are people, we are humans. Like we want to see fun, unique things. I mean, our booth at events for Mobley right now is badge scanners suck. And you wouldn't believe how many people come up and they're like, we don't know what you do, but we agree with that. And we're like, well, let me tell you, you know, just making sure that it doesn't have to be so serious. It can be fun and yeah, and a little bit inappropriate. So awesome. Lori, I want to give a shout out to this, that when you're setting and aligning on metrics and KPIs during early planning on your POR, incorporate ROE, ROX, and ROO in addition to ROI to satisfy different stakeholder objectives. That just goes into that collaboration point. And yeah, it doesn't have to be one number that you're showing. It can be a full story, as Mikey and Paul were talking earlier. So I think that's helpful. But any last notes, any last minute questions from anyone that want to put in? But I want to just thank everyone for being here, and I want to thank Paul, Mikey, and Chris. I'm excited to see all the attendees' faces next month. We'll announce our webinar, but any questions for any of us, you can find us all on LinkedIn, and we are here for you. But the recording will be live on the website shortly. So thank you all so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all.
Bye.